Okay, I want to open up a discussion about something that I know is going to ruffle some feathers, but I want to get the conversation going and maybe get an idea of what you think of this. Just over 5 weeks left in the NHL regular season. We're starting to get a pretty good idea of who's going to face who in the opening round of this year's Stanley Cup playoffs. But what if the standings weren't the only way to decide the opening round matchups? What if, by finishing first in your division, you actually earned the right to decide who you would face in the first round of the playoffs? You know who might love that option right now? The Vancouver Canucks. They've got to feel like they could be getting totally shafted this year. They fought all season long. They've earned the second best winning percentage in the entire NHL. They've got a great shot at first overall in the President's Trophy. And after all that, you know what the reward could be? If the regular season ended today, the Vancouver Canucks would get the defending Stanley Cup champion, Vegas Golden Knights, in the opening round of the playoffs. The team who just shocked the rest of the league at the trade deadline by picking up top 4 D-man Noah Hannafin, scoring winger Anthony Mantha. And then they blew the lid right off of things by acquiring Thomas Hertl right at the deadline buzzer when few else even had any idea that he was available. And if that's not enough, Jack Eichel's got 3 points in 3 games since coming back from his injury. And there's a really good chance that after missing all kinds of time, Captain Mark Stone is going to be back from his spleen injury just in time for the start of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Thanks to some amazing cap gymnastics and great use of long-term injury reserve, Vegas is going to have a playoff payroll valued at about $110 million, about $30 million over the cap. If you're the Vancouver Canucks, would you want to face Vegas in the opening round right now? Sure, we can all talk about how unfair it is for Vegas to get away with all this, and they may indeed change the rules to try to stop teams from getting away with this in the future. Remember, Tampa, they did a very similar thing. They went on to win the Stanley Cup. But none of that is going to help the Vancouver Canucks right now. You know what could help Vancouver right now? Giving them the right to pick their first-round opponent. Because if winning a division gave you the right to do that, then there's no way the Canucks would pick Vegas. Surely they'd go with the other current wild card in the West right now, Nashville. The Preds aren't anywhere near as good as Vegas is right now, and the Canucks swept them 3-0 in the season series. Okay, so that's the West. What about the situation and potentially picking your opponent in the NHL's Eastern Conference? Right now, the Panthers and Bruins are battling for top spot in the Atlantic Division. New York is best in the Metro. Again, what if the division winners got to choose their opening round opponent? Now, this could cause things to really hit the fan. If you're Florida, Boston, and New York and end up winning your division, one of them is likely going to get Tampa in the opening round of the playoffs. But what if, as the division winner, you got to choose your first round opponent instead? Sure, you could still face Tampa. Yes, they're a wild card team and they're further down the standings, but do you really want to risk facing Andrei Vasilevsky in the playoffs? A former Vezina winner, a Conn Smythe winner, who led the Tampa Bay Lightning to back-to-back cups in 2020 and 2021. Sure, he hasn't been at the top of his game recently, but he's been clutch in the playoffs. We've seen that. And you know he could get hot at any time. Do you really want to risk facing him in a 7-game series if you had a way to avoid him? Or if you had the choice, would you sit back and say, hey, you know what? We want to pick the Toronto Maple Leafs as our opening round opponent instead. The Panthers knocked them out in just 5 games in last year's playoffs. The Bruins have eliminated the Leafs the last 3 times they faced them in the playoffs. And Toronto has only won 1 playoff series in the last 20 years. I know what you're thinking. Can you imagine how angry the Leafs would be if the Bruins, Panthers, or even the Rangers actually chose to face them? Can you imagine the kind of fire that would bring to a playoff series? That's the ultimate billboard material. The players, the fans, the media could turn this into the ultimate playoff rivalry filled with incredible animosity. And isn't that exactly what playoff hockey should be all about? This isn't a new idea. I know that. People have been talking about this on and off for years. It's just moved back to the forefront because the PWHL has just announced that's exactly what they're going to do in their inaugural playoffs this spring. And, of course, because of what Vegas just did. using the trade deadline and some world-class cap gymnastics to go from playoff bubble team to a serious contender to repeat as Stanley Cup champions. All this could come at the expense of the Vancouver Canucks, who could get them in the opening round. I know it's too late to change the format for this year's playoffs, but it doesn't mean we can't at least start the conversation. What do you think of what Vegas has done? If you were the Canucks and had a choice to face Vegas or Nashville in the opening round of the playoffs, who would you pick? If you were the Bruins, Panthers, or even the Rangers, if you finished first in your division and had the choice to face Vasilevsky and the Lightning or to face the Leafs, who have struggled badly in the playoffs, who would you pick? How do you think the Leafs would respond to being picked as an opponent? How sour would you be? Should the NHL consider shifting to the pick-your-own-opponent in the opening round playoff system in the future? That's a lot to consider. So, you've heard what I have to say. Now it's time to hear from you.